Right. So apparently I'm going to be talking about how Hunk's story could be more compelling to a remake version, as it wasn't really seen that mystically mentioned much in Code Veronica except for the note. So I'm going to be putting a story together apparently and saying what happens. So as we know, Hunk delivers Tyrant, which we know, which would impact him later, which would be interesting because that would tie down into specific fights. So apparently, we basically wouldn't see Tyrant unless it gets released. So apparently, Hank does his thing, yada yada yada. Um, apparently, also having a connection with Alfred, in a way, because Alfred he works for Alfred, but basically thinks, why was he delivering this? And then, apparently, as the story progresses onwards, we get to the real, like a couple of times, Hunk does knock into Wesker a couple of times during the climax. So apparently during the segment of the story, he does bump into Wesker, but they walk it off. However, apparently they just walk away from each other. However, keep seeing each other a couple of times and thinking, wait, okay. So now Hunk has no idea about the whole thing that went on, however, because he came before the massive outbreak issue. So Wesker basically bombed the island on time as Hunk arrived, meaning Claire was in jail, apparently. So now the next thing is eventually, now as the thing goes, Hunk does things before and after specific events. So there'd be too much to handle over. So apparently you're gonna skip to Alfred letting Tyrant out. So apparently, as Tyrant comes out, normally he comes to that gay area, but Hunk is also in that area, which would make sense in a way because I'm gonna say why. So Hunk apparently is doing his own thing, whether like picking up samples like he usually does. Thinking why the outbreak has started, and such. So all of a sudden, Tyrant busts out of somewhere. And now, basically the fight starts. Apparently, so apparently, some of the place ends up on fire. And Hunk has to fight him. Apparently, so now he basically does down him. Apparently in the end. So then, as we know, Tyrant actually would fight Claire. And then that would lead to the plane, which Claire and Steve actually deal with Tyrant. But then the next thing happens with a twist. Tyrant falls from the plane, and then Hunk has to fight him again. Apparently for the second time. And then the next thing that happens is he tends to get away to a jet, and then Tyrant latches onto that jet without Hunk knowing. So it goes all the way to the Atlantic base, um, apparently, and then that's where they cross paths. Apparently, now since Hunk was the last one to leave, apparently he would end up noticing the big massive plane that crashed, the Titan plane. So he basically would get out and wonder about the plane that just crashed and say, well, that's a crash landing. So he would eventually encounter Wesker along the way, and then they have like a little conversation or whatever. Hung's not sure who bombed the island yet, and what actually happened. So the next thing is he goes out of his way apparently, and then ends up in a conversation with Alfred. And so apparently with that, Alfred seems surprised that that Hunk's still alive. Up to that point. So in that point, so the next thing that happened is Alfred would send would actually also be double surprised because his creation is alive, meaning Tyrant. So Tyrant would continue to chase Hunk as Hunk calls Alfred a traitor. As he actually was working for him, and Alfred turned his back on him. So that would go like that. Hunk would eventually have to keep fighting him and fighting him and fighting him as it goes on. So that would be his actual boss that he'd have to keep pinning down. And the fights would get more intense as it goes on. And then eventually he does end up in a confrontation between Chris and Wesker. Apparently, this is like near the end. Now they do have this chat conversation, and Chris takes one look at Hunk and asks whose side is he on. And now Hunk replies to Chris that he's a mercenary. Apparently for Umbrella, like a security service sort of thing. So he would turn around to Wesker, saying, "So you bombed the island?" And then Chris would reply, "What?" And then apparently after that, Wesker would say it's true. He bombed the island and doomed everybody on the island. Apparently, so there's that. Apparently, so the other thing that would happen is, what Hunk would team up with Chris, because Wesker is doing something really bad. So they both team up on Wesker, and to fight Wesker apparently. Now, for this, Wesker would be strong and fast, apparently, instead of in the original, where he didn't stand much of a chance. But in this, he would be sort of stronger, and he would have that speed, and no matter how they would. So apparently, in this, Wesker wouldn't be as fast as his RE5 counterpart. But it'd be able to sort of fight them off. Now, he would actually kick Chris's butt easily, like he did in the original. Like in Veronica, however. Hunk, on the other hand, would basically stand a chance because he's really good at martial arts and he would easily defend Chris in the time of need because he's been training for years. Now, he should be able to block Wesker's attacks a couple of times or whatever, even sort of trick him into a situation with grenades and all sorts. So you should be able to pull him off guard. So eventually, as basically we know, Wesker does take a blow in the face, like he usually does. Like in Veronica, he does get his face burnt. So he actually does run off. To basically get out of there. So the next thing is they do intend to leave the area. Now this was basically during basically escaping because I'm not really counting much of Claire's sort of story because now apparently during the final climax they come to the final spot, or because they know something's wrong, or so they intend to escape no matter what. So they eventually all bump into one area together. So they all look at each other. Even like Clara meets up with them, whatever, and is thinking, okay. So the next thing they do is Hunk intends to basically this is like the final climax of basically Hunk leaving after everything that went awry during basically the self-destruction thing as they're all escaping. Now Chris would ask if Hunk has a ride, and Hunk would reply, he does. He does have a ride. But before he leaves, as the others are escaping, he has to fight Tyrant one last time. One last time. So that would be his strongest by then. So that would be extremely hard boss fight. He would have to fight. So eventually he basically gets help from somebody that comes in a helicopter, which we know a lot about who it could be. Now, the thing it could be is it could be Ada. Yeah, Ada could basically come to could have basically came with a helicopter to aid in the battle against Tyrant. Now, apparently, during the last segment of the fight, Ada would drop down a rocket launcher to Hunk, and Hunk would use it against Tyrant. So eventually that would basically kill him in the climax at the end of the actual boss fight when he's about to kill him. So apparently most of that boss fight would be like shooting him until she drops the rocket launcher, and then that's it. And then they have like a conversation in the helicopter as they're leaving. Talking about that how he actually used to be part of Rockman Island. He used to train there and such, which would be really interesting because they would even apparently now. The other thing is Hunk would actually say also that Alfred betrayed him, however, and he's not happy by it. So the next thing he would actually do is he would try to stop this from happening again, of being tricked. So the next thing he does after that, he gets another team together, and then basically that's the end of his scenario, his campaign thing, and then that's pretty much it, because that would be the last part of his story. And then there'll be like a credit scene of his of it, basically of what he would be doing apparently. So the next thing would be the credit scene. So the credit scene, he'd be doing something completely different than what like Leon does. Now what he would do, he would start reading files and files and files about everything that Alfred did on the island and such. And then he starts to read upon the next file to do with the Adandas, which is the village that Leon goes to. He starts reading about the infection on that village and seems keen on it. So apparently that's where it goes at the end, apparently. And apparently that's basically that's all I have to say. I mean, there is other things I like to mention, like little extras in the thing, like one scene like to do with Steve's father. Like Hunk would have been there way before Claire, however. So Hunk would have actually had to deal with Steve's father because he was a zombie. So now the other thing is Hunk actually thought he killed him, which he didn't apparently. So that zombie comes back as well. Steve's father actually comes back as a zombie because Hunk was actually in a hurry to get somewhere. Which we'd expect him to do, as he was always in a rush. So Apparently, also having a couple of tie-in conversations with the characters would be interesting, as well. Especially him having certain dialogues with things that he interacts with, like funny scenes and whatever. Especially that Alfred video, like he could actually look at that after Claire has basically looked at the video. Um, and then he would look at the video after Claire apparently, and then and then think it's some sort of weird shit or something like that. Because it would be strange to him, because you'd think, you know, brother and sister sort of thing, and think it's some sort of inbreeding problem. So that would be another one. And such. There's a lot he could interact with, which would be funny because he can make a lot of like jokes or whatever. Kind of like if he was fighting Tyrant or whatever, it'd be like, Tyrant who released this, and then he would say, "No matter, I'll put it down like the dog it is," because he would actually put down monsters even if he's forced to do so. What he be successful to actually pin down the Tyrant, because it would get stronger each time he tries to pin it down, um, as it would become stronger each time. And it would work so well than it did in the original, because Tyrant didn't really work as well in the original, like in Code Veronica. But in the remake, the way I've mentioned how Tyrant would work with as a stalker could work more with Hunk, because Hunk is connected to Rockford Island. He was the one that delivered Tyrant to Alfred Ashford, so it would make more sense for Tyrant to have more of a story to Hank to chase him down and whatever, and not stop unless he's actually got him. It would make also Alfred Ashford more of a traitor to Hank, as Hunk would start to hate Alfred more as it goes on, because of what he did. Even though Alfred Ashford's true intention was to send Tyrant after Steve and Claire, but he also basically know that Tyrant would hurt everybody, so he didn't really care. He wouldn't actually care if it hurt Hank also. So that's sort of basically also being called traitor, because he knew Hank was on that island, so he would have sent Tyrant after him also. So that's the other thing as well, because it works so well in a story, especially with Hank having his own campaign and such, and a couple of other puzzles that don't cross other people's puzzles. You know, like new ones that you have to interact with. Maybe like some new areas the others can't interact with. There's a lot of places that Hong would go into, however, that some characters would have to intertwine. Sometimes they run past each other, however. Sometimes they'd end up in different areas and such. Something like that, and they'd like do different things, however, which also be interesting. And also during parts of the game of the remake, Ada would be chatting with Hunk, which would be interesting. Now, the funny thing is, Hunk wouldn't know who this mysterious person is, because it'd be a mystery until the very end of the game, until he sees Ada at the very end, the climax, in a helicopter. Now that would be interesting, and then he'd be wondering, apparently why. So he would actually look at Ada and he says, "So you're the famous Ada Wong?" And then she would reply, "Yes, how did you know?" And then Hunk would say to Ada, "You don't really keep your identity a secret." And then Ada would reply to Hunk, and she would say, "It seems like you do, since no one really knows your face." no one actually knows your identity because there's no record of it. Apparently, because whatever record he had probably was gone, got rid of, or whatever. So something like that would work. With Hank. So they would basically connect more as the story goes on. Like chat conversations and stuff like that going on between them. So kind of like he's talking to somebody all the time. Behind that, because we know Ada goes elsewhere. So she probably came from somewhere. Don't know yet. So she could have actually been helping during the segments, like something to do, because I know Ada goes somewhere, and then she gets recruited by Wesker, and then, and then I think she actually ends up on Rough Island somehow, which would be great in a helicopter, I think, like coming to rescue Hunk, because that would work so well. Since we didn't really know what Hunk was doing during the time, Claire and Steve apparently, and Chris and whatever. So story you mentioned would definitely make more sense because it would intertwine with those characters and such. Maybe also fighting some bosses that could intertwine with those ones. Like certain things happening and such. Also, like some areas that Claire and Steve can't enter, but Hank can. Stuff like that would work so well, especially giving some bosses to Hank, so he'd be the one to fight some of them. So then Claire wouldn't have too many bosses, so it'd be like split. So like the main ones that Claire would go for, and the ones that have more of an impact or in the story, then that's the one she would fight mainly. So there'd be some bosses that Hunk would fight, however, that Claire wouldn't really fight. So there's that, which would be pretty interesting. Especially like new monsters, new bosses and such. Like maybe the Bandersnatch being one of them. One of the bosses that Hunk would fight more. Alongside Tyrants, so that would be like two different bosses that you would have to fight, even though you would have to fight Tyrant multiple times. So apparently that's the story I was thinking of, and I'm hoping Capcom think of that idea, because it could be a good one, and it could actually connect Hank more to Code Veronica if they made a remake. So apparently that's the story I thought of. So basically that's the idea, I hope.